Ask your lolo this question. Were Filipinos poor before Spain arrived? He'll probably say yes. Most Filipinos say yes, because that's what we were taught. Primitive islands, simple villages, people who needed Spain to bring them civilization. But here is what your history teacher never told you. Before Spain arrived, there were 5 Filipino kingdoms so wealthy that Spain's entire royal treasury couldn't match what they had, not combined, individually. And what happened to all that wealth is one of the most devastating stories in Filipino history. Today, you're going to hear it for the first time. When Spanish forces first landed in the Philippines in 1565, they expected to find what they found everywhere else they colonized: simple people, limited resources, easy conquest. What they actually found stopped them cold: gold everywhere. Not hidden, not buried, not locked away, worn openly, on bodies, in homes, in markets. Spanish chronicler Miguel de Loarca wrote back to Spain describing Filipino nobility wearing more gold than the Spanish royal court itself. He described gold ankle bracelets, gold armlets stacked from wrist to elbow, gold neck pieces of extraordinary craftsmanship. He described ordinary Filipino merchants, not royalty, wearing gold that European nobility would have killed for. This was not a poor nation. This was a civilization that had been accumulating and refining gold for over 1,000 years. And it belonged to 5 kingdoms. 5 kingdoms that were richer than Spain. Before we go deeper, our goal on this video is to get 500 likes and share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Kingdom 1. Butuan, the land where even slaves wore gold. Ask your lolo if he's heard of Butuan. He probably hasn't. Your history teacher probably mentioned it once, and then moved on. But Butuan deserves so much more than one mention, because Butuan was the wealthiest kingdom in all of Southeast Asia. Not one of the wealthiest. The wealthiest. In 1001 CE, Raja Kiling of Butuan sent diplomatic envoys to the Chinese imperial court. The Chinese emperor's scholars, men who had seen the wealth of every kingdom in Asia, wrote detailed records of what the Butuan envoys brought. They were stunned. They wrote that Butuan had more gold than Sumatra, which was already famous across Asia for being impossibly wealthy. They described a kingdom where gold was so abundant that even slaves wore gold jewelry. Not the king, not the nobles, the slaves. Think about what that means. In medieval Europe, gold was so scarce that kings fought wars over it. In Butuan, it was so common that the lowest members of society wore it as everyday decoration. The Chinese records described houses decorated with gold ornaments, everyday items made from gold. Gold used the way Filipinos today use plastic. Archaeologists confirmed every word of it. Excavations in Butuan uncovered gold artifacts of extraordinary craftsmanship, dating back to the 4th century. Alongside the gold, they found beads from Egypt, pottery from China, Thailand, and Vietnam. Butuan wasn't just rich, it was connected to trade networks spanning 3 continents. And then Spain arrived, and Butuan's gold disappeared forever. Kingdom 2, Tondo, the Kingdom Spain, built Manila on top of. You've walked on Tondo's grave. Every Filipino who has ever been to Manila has. Because in 1571, when Spanish forces captured Manila and built their colonial capital, they built it directly on top of the ruins of one of Southeast Asia's most powerful kingdoms, Tondo, a maritime superpower that had controlled trade routes across Southeast Asia for over 600 years. Founded around 900 CE, Tondo's influence stretched across Luzon and beyond. We know Tondo existed because of one extraordinary artifact, the Laguna copper plate. Dated 900 CE, it is the oldest known written document in Philippine history. It's a legal document about debt forgiveness, written in Old Malay using an Indian script, mentioning trade connections, financial systems, and diplomatic relationships across Southeast Asia. This was not a primitive settlement. This was a kingdom with written laws, complex financial systems, a bureaucracy sophisticated enough to produce legal documents about debt forgiveness in 900 CE. Tondo's ruler held the title Lakandula, Lord of the Palace. The last great Lakandula cooperated with Spain initially, hoping to preserve his people. But his nephew Raja Sulaiman refused. He fought. He died fighting Spanish forces in the Battle of Bangkusay Channel in 1571. And Spain built Intramuros, their colonial capital, directly on top of everything Tondo had built. The kingdom that had traded with China for 600 years became the foundation of Spanish colonial power in Asia. Kingdom 3. Cebu, the kingdom that killed Magellan. Every Filipino knows Lapu-Lapu, but most Filipinos don't know what he was protecting. Lapu-Lapu wasn't just a warrior, he was the defender of one of the wealthiest trading kingdoms in the Visayas, the Rajanate of Cebu. Founded in the 1200s by Sri Lumai, a prince from the Chola dynasty of Sumatra, Cebu had become a major trading hub connecting the Visayas to the broader Southeast Asian economy. When Magellan arrived in 1521, Raja Humabon of Cebu welcomed him. He saw an opportunity for a powerful new trading partner. He even converted to Christianity, along with hundreds of his subjects. But Magellan made a fatal mistake. He got involved in local politics. He offered to help Humabon defeat his rival, Datu Lapu-Lapu of nearby Mactan Island. On April 27, 1521, Magellan led a small force to Mactan. Lapu-Lapu was waiting. In the Battle of Mactan, Filipino warriors killed Magellan and drove off his forces. The most famous explorer of his age, killed on a Philippine beach, by a Filipino datu protecting his kingdom's sovereignty. But here's what most Filipinos don't know: Cebu didn't fall that day. It continued as an independent kingdom for 44 more years. 44 more years of trade, of wealth, of sovereignty. It wasn't until 1565 that Spain finally conquered Cebu. The kingdom that killed Magellan eventually became the first permanent Spanish settlement in the Philippines. Its gold melted, its sovereignty erased. Kingdom 4, Sulu, the kingdom Spain never conquered. Now here is something that should make every Filipino proud. There was one kingdom that Spain tried to conquer for over 300 years, and failed, every single time. The Sultanate of Sulu. Founded in 1405, Sulu controlled the Sulu archipelago and parts of Borneo and Sulawesi. Its wealth came from two sources: pearls and power. The Sulu Sea produced some of the finest pearls in the world. Pearls that were traded across Asia and the Middle East for prices that made European merchants dizzy. But Sulu also maintained something Spain feared more than any army: a fleet of fast raiding vessels that knew every reef, every current, every hidden channel in the Sulu Sea. Spain called them pirates. Sulu called them naval defenders of their sovereignty. For 3 centuries, Spain threw everything they had at Sulu: military expeditions, blockades, alliances with neighboring kingdoms. All of it failed. The Sulu warriors knew their waters the way your lolo knows the streets of his hometown. Every approach, every retreat, every hiding place. Spain could never bring their superior firepower to bear against an enemy that simply disappeared into waters too shallow and too complex for Spanish galleons to follow. It wasn't until the American colonial period in 1915 that the Sultanate of Sulu was finally abolished, making it one of the longest-lasting kingdoms in Southeast Asian history. Spain ruled the Philippines for 333 years. They never ruled Sulu, not once. Kingdom 5. Maguindanao, the empire that made Spain nightmare. And then there was Maguindanao, the kingdom that gave Spain its worst nightmare. Founded in the early 1500s, the Sultanate of Maguindanao controlled the fertile Cotabato Valley, the breadbasket of Muslim Mindanao. But Maguindanao's greatest weapon wasn't its land. It was one man, Sultan Kudarat. He ruled from 1619 to 1671, and for 52 years he made Spanish commanders across the Philippines lose sleep. While other kingdoms fell to Spanish forces, Kudarat unified Muslim kingdoms across Mindanao and Sulu into a single defensive alliance. He didn't fight Spain with courage alone. He fought them with strategy. He acquired cannons and firearms through trade with the Dutch, who were also fighting Spain across Southeast Asia. He fortified his capital, trained professional soldiers, built an intelligence network that tracked every Spanish movement. When Spanish expeditions invaded, they didn't find primitive warriors. They found organized armies with artillery, fortifications, tactical sophistication that matched anything Spain had encountered in Asia. His famous speech rejecting Spanish demands for submission is still quoted today, a masterpiece of defiant rhetoric from a man who refused, in the face of the most powerful colonial empire on earth, to bow. Spain eventually established some presence in Maguindanao territory, but they never truly controlled it. It took American forces with superior 20th-century weaponry to finally subdue the region in the early 1900s. Maguindanao was the last Philippine kingdom to fall. So where did all the gold go? The gold of Butuan, the wealth of Tondo, the riches of Cebu. Here is the answer that should make every Filipino stop breathing for a moment. It was melted. Not studied, not preserved, not respected. Melted. Spanish colonial forces systematically collected Filipino gold artifacts, ceremonial pieces, artistic works, jewelry that represented generations of Filipino craftsmanship, and threw them into furnaces. The molten gold was cast into bars, loaded onto Manila galleons, shipped to Spain, where it funded European wars, built European palaces, filled European royal treasuries. The National Museum of the Philippines estimates that only a tiny fraction of pre-colonial Filipino gold artifacts survived. The rest, gone forever, not lost somewhere waiting to be found, destroyed, deliberately, by a colonial government that looked at 1,000 years of Filipino artistic achievement and saw raw material. The next time someone tells you Filipinos were poor before Spain arrived, you can tell them the truth. Before Spain, Filipino kingdoms were so wealthy that even slaves wore gold. Before Spain, Filipino traders negotiated with Chinese emperors and Arab merchants. Before Spain, Filipino kingdoms resisted the most powerful colonial empire on earth for centuries. And when Spain finally took the gold, they didn't just take the metal, they took the physical proof of a civilization they didn't want Filipinos to remember. But the memory survived. In the Laguna copper plate sitting in the National Museum, in the Butuan gold artifacts that archaeologists recovered from the earth, in the oral traditions of Sulu and Maguindanao, kingdoms that refuse to forget and refuse to bow, in you. watching this video, refusing to forget. Share this with every Filipino you know, because this is the wealth they took from us. And the least we can do is remember it. Subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the Filipino story that colonial history tried to erase.